Welcome. You're listening to the Beyond 50 radio program, and thank you for tuning in. I'm your host, Daniel Davis. Joining us on the program today is a wonderful wanderer, and I think that a lot of us, as we approach midlife and we find ourselves wondering where we should wander off to, perhaps today we might give you an idea that you didn't consider before but may have been burning and yearning inside of you most of your life without you being aware of it. Today, joining us on the program is a freelance writer and photographer whose work has appeared in Surf Life for Women and Surfline.com, as well as the Seattle Times. She took her wandering and a board tucked under her arm and decided to start surfing different coastlines around the world. And she's with us on the program today to share her experience and what it takes and what kind of benefits you can experience as you decide to embark on this particular mission. And I'd like to welcome to our program today our guest, Amy Washel. And Amy, thank you for joining us here on the Beyond 50 radio program.
Thank you very much.
Now, you say in your book that you've been pretty much a consummate outdoors person, somebody who really enjoyed adventure. When did you first decide you wanted to pick up a board and start catching waves?
I was probably when I met my husband. At the time, he was a boyfriend, and he was originally from California, and I had grown up surfing.
Uh-huh. And so that was about what age then?
I was 29.
29 years old, see? That's very key because a lot of times I keep thinking of the movie Point Break where Keanu Reeves says, oh, this is for little rubber people who don't shave yet. And then the kid's like, well, it's never too late. And here you're approaching the age of 30 and picking up a board for the first time. What was that like for you?
Well, it's always different when you learn a new skill as an adult, I think. I think you're just more aware of all the little steps, and you're more aware of, I think, of failing than you are when you're just, 5 years old, say, learning to swim or riding a bike.
Not worrying about crashing so much. You just go ahead and take the hits and get back up, but as an adult, you kind of plan out a little more, maybe?
Yeah, that's right. So I think I was maybe more committed to it, and the thrill of it was really surprising. I didn't think it was going to be nearly as much fun as it was.
Uh-huh. Now, did you start on the beaches of California, or did you actually start up in Washington, where you're from?
I actually started in Canada.
Canada.
A little town. Yeah, in a
chilly
little town.
Water up there, baby.
Yeah, I think it's pretty cold up there. But it's a little town called Tofino, and it's a great little surf mecca on the west coast of Vancouver Island. And I tried to surf in Mexico when I was on vacation with my husband, who at the time was just, like I said, a boyfriend, who had surfed, and he tried to teach me, and it was a horrible failure. And so about 9 months later, I think we went up to Tofino, which is about a 6-hour trip from where we were living in Washington State, and it was in the middle of winter, but I was committed. I wanted to learn to surf, and so I took a lesson from a surf school up there, and that was when I was hooked.
Yeah, I know you talked quite a bit about the surf school. Go ahead and describe what that is.
Well, this particular surf school is called Surf Sister, and it's an all-women surf school founded by a woman who is from the area, Jenny Stewart, and she decided that she wanted to provide lessons for women to surf, and she started it, I think it was about 10 years ago. So I took what was called a weekend clinic, and it happened, normally they have about, 6 or so students, but it was the middle of January, so I was the only one who signed up.
Yeah, that's cold in the middle of January, too, I'm sure.
It was really cold, and I had on a wetsuit that was really thick, and so that helped, but it's still, even with a lot of neoprene, it was very cold, but the lesson was geared to kind of get you started and make sure that you know the safety and how to get up on top of the board and ride a wave, and just gave me the fundamentals.
Now, did that take you a bit to be able to get up on a board and have the balance, and then how long did it take before you started noticing, I'm not only digging and enjoying the ride here, but I got to go back and get some more?
Well, that happened the very first time I stood up on the board. It's an amazing thrill to be riding a moving medium, to be riding the energy from the wave.
Versus like a skateboard or a bicycle, for instance.
Yeah, it's a little bit like that, but it's because you don't feel the wheels underneath your feet. You hear just the water and the peaceful sounds of the birds, or so it's more, I don't know, it's just more of a thrill, I guess, than say riding a bike.
I know it was even said by Laird Hamilton, big wave surfing great, who says it's sort of a place where you find and lose yourself all at the same time. Did you have those experiences?
Yeah, you just because you're so in the exact moment, you're there. You forget about everything else, and it's almost like time stops. Even though the wave may only last a couple of seconds, it feels like an hour, and it feels like everything that you were worried about or everything that has been on your mind, it just melts away.
Mm-hmm. Now, how's that permeated in other areas of your life?
Well, the surfing part and the traveling part, I think, both have had an influence. Like when we went to Fiji, the people that live there just have they have not a care in the world, which is pretty remarkable. And they don't care about time and being on time, or it's just things just kind of flow, and that's how they live. And at first, it's really hard to plug into that kind of lifestyle because we're so consumed with being on time and that we're late for things
and whatnot. Yeah,
exactly. So, but once you can get rid of it, in fact, I had to let go of my watch. I had to take it off and put it in my suitcase because I said, okay, we would leave at 9 to go to the waves, but it would be maybe 9:30 or it would be 10, and so you're at the dock just going crazy, like, where is everybody? We're missing the waves. And so you just kind of have to let go of that. And once you do, it's an incredible freedom that you feel, just not having to be that way. It's a choice that you make. And so that's part of what has definitely permeated into my life now, although I do wear a watch, but I'm far less concerned, I think, about all those little minuscule, bits of time that I was before. But the surfing part, surfing gives you I read once, someone wrote, it gives you this private sense of well-being. And it's true. When you go out and you can catch a wave and you're with nature in one of the most purest forms that I've ever experienced, you just have a kind of a spring to your step. And it just makes you, I think, a happier person. At least I feel like I am.
I know it's interesting if anybody's ever had the opportunity to see Riding Giants, which is a great documentary about the history of big wave surfing, as they talked about the surfing counterculture in the 50s, and it was just a small period of time, and that's all these guys did was surf. And he says even then you could literally live off the land, and you go, when do we ever get that utopia back in anything we ever do? And you must have found yourself in a lot of situations like that where you thought, God, this is just about as good as it'll ever get.
Yes, definitely. Especially in some really warm water surf destinations like Hawaii. It's hard to live off the land there just because it's so urban.
Right.
But there are still pockets of places where you really could because of the food that grows on the trees and off the land. You could live off the land and you could surf every day. It'd be a little more challenging. But places like, say, Costa Rica or even Fiji, the choices of food are pretty limited, though. You're stuck with fish, chickens, and arrowroot. But you could do it.
Yeah. Now, I'm kind of curious, Amy. Now, how did you choose to go to the locations that you did? Was it based on the waves itself, or were these just places that you wanted to go?
Fiji was the first place that we really traveled. And at first it wasn't just about the waves. It was just to see something so unique in terms of culture and climate and everything, and to go to do something kind of exotic. And then the more I was getting into surfing, the more we looked into, wow, we should really consider doing something more surf-related when we go there. And so we went to 2 different places. One was a tiny island that there was just surfing. There was absolutely nothing else to do. There was no beaches. It was a rock lump in the middle of the ocean. And so we had that experience, which was just you did everything for the surf. And then another experience where we were in a place that had a little bit more to offer in terms of hiking and visiting some villages and being able to go to the bigger cities and see some other parts of the island. But we became pretty focused on the surf just because it is such a unique setup and a unique place to catch waves.
Mm-hmm. Now, you had also been to Morocco, and I know that in that chapter was the possibility of big waves. Now, what were some of the large waves that you've been able to experience? Like
how big were they, you mean?
Yeah.
Or, we surfed a couple days where the surf was just probably almost double overhead, which is anywhere from 10 feet faces. 10 to 12 feet faces, which is probably some of the biggest waves I've ever surfed. It was December, and that's when they get all their big surf. But the wave also there, almost all of them are point break waves, and in my opinion, point break waves are easier to surf big versus a beach break. I think it's a lot more challenging to surf big waves.
Now, describe the difference between a point break and a beach break wave.
A point break wave it breaks because the swell that's coming in hits a very particular location. Either it's a point of land or it's, say, a submerged area of rock, or usually it's like just a tiny point of land that sticks out of the coast, and so it sort of catches that swell. And point break waves are, many surfers prefer to surf them because they are very predictable. They almost always break in exactly the same spot, so you know exactly where to sit to wait for the waves. And they also sometimes offer some of the longest rides. In fact, I think the longest waves in the world that I know of are both point break waves. And so you know where to sit and you know where to paddle out because the wave it doesn't change as much versus a beach break, depending upon which way the swell is coming and depending upon a lot of other conditions, the tide and the wind. And you can have waves breaking in many different spots along the beach. And so it's a little bit more difficult to catch them because you're not exactly sure where they're going to break. And often when the surf gets really big at a beach break, you have a lot of white water, which means broken waves. And so when you're paddling out to get outside of that impact zone so that you can catch the clean waves, it's often a lot more difficult just because you have so many broken waves, lines and lines of white water to try to get outside, and the paddling is usually a lot more difficult.
I know one of the most difficult of those, but also one of the best big waves, as I understand, is out of Mavericks in San Francisco.
Yes.
Because when you were describing the breaking of the waves, boy, that's a challenging one there just to even get out to it. And then once you come in on the wave, then it's a matter of being able to get out of the wave so you can get back out there and do it again. And you're thinking to yourself, you guys got to be out of your mind. But then they say, but once you've experienced this, oh, man, that's just like, enlightenment all the way around. And I'd imagine that you've experienced that in many of the different places that you've been to, in different ways as well.
Yeah, I mean, I have never surfed Mavericks, nor do I ever want to. It's in a league way beyond my abilities or desires. But, I mean, sometimes my best wave of the year might be a tiny, ankle-high or knee-high little wave that just happens to be a great moment. Or it could be a really big wave that I had to really psych myself up for and push myself to catch, and it provides just a wonderful, thrilling, and rewarding experience. It could be the setting. It could just be a gorgeous day, especially up here in the Northwest. Even though it is really cold, we just have such a beautiful coastline, and Oregon does too, where you just have gorgeous old-growth trees, and you've got eagles and seals and whales in the lineup. And, I mean, just a gorgeous environment for being in the water, whether you're surfing or sailing or fishing or whatever. So yeah, it's life-changing, I think.
Which is much different than the camel you experienced in Morocco.
Yeah, that was not very enlightening.
Tell us about that. That's actually kind of a funny story.
Yeah, we had been in Morocco a few days, and we were trying to find this particular break called Banana Point, which it was a really nice, great wave for longboarding, which is primarily the kind of surfing that I do. And we just couldn't figure out how to get there, so we had ended up on this kind of big arroyo, it felt like, just a plain of sand, and we couldn't get to the wave. Well, out of the mist, it seemed like this guy on a camel comes walking down the road, and he was all dressed up like, in my opinion, he looked like he was headed to the Oasis. I mean, he had he was going to go trade dates or something. I mean, I really was not thinking very clearly about what was going on.
Real Lawrence of Arabia, if you will.
Yeah, he had on the turban, and he had the long robes, and he had, his camel had the saddle with all the decorations on it, and I really was very, I wasn't really thinking clearly. So I wanted to take a picture, and so I grabbed my camera, and I went up to the man, and he saw my camera, and immediately had the camel sit down, and was talking to me in broken English and some French, that I should, come see. And in Morocco, everybody says, come see. And you say, no, no, thank you. And they say, no, no, come see. And after a while, you feel like you're being forced. So I said, okay. So I went closer, and I took a picture, and then he said I should get on. And I said, no, thank you, no, thank you. And he said, no. Yeah, I said, no, I take picture. And I thought, okay, all right. I thought he was just kind of being a nice guy. Well, I get on the camel, and he gives some command, and the thing stands up, and I just about fell off because when they stand up, their back legs come up, and you get thrown forward, and then their front legs come up, and you get thrown back. And if there hadn't been like a little grip there on the saddle, I would have somersaulted off the back. Mm-hmm. And then he starts walking with the camel, walking away from my husband and our friend Rick, who was traveling with us. And then I got really scared. I didn't know where we were going. And I'm yelling at him in French because I had a little bit of French from high school classes, and yelling at him in French to stop, that I go back, and he's just kind of blithely walking along, just with this sort of bemused smirk on his face, like I don't know, like we were headed off on this long journey. And so finally he turned around and walked back, and then he got the camel to sit down, and I quickly got off, and then he stood there, and I figured it out. Finally, I don't know why I was so dense, but finally that he was looking for money. And I didn't have any. We had completely left all of our valuables behind because it was Morocco, and you just don't know if you leave your car while you surf. You don't know what's going to happen. So we didn't have anything with us. I had my camera, and I had what I had on, and a towel, I think, for after the surf. And so I dug around in our rented car, and I found this like completely squished and probably crumbled up Luna bar. And I offered it to him, and I tried to explain that this is really all I had, and I think I've offended him deeply, but what can you do?
Really, he tried to put you on the back of the camera. You surf waves.
Yes, right.
Now it's kind of interesting because you've been to a lot of really unique places, and I know one of the ones that you described in your book, you said you absolutely just loved how accommodating the weather was, and that was in Sicily.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it.
Little facetiousness always helps when it comes to surfing, I think.
Yeah, it was warm and sunny 9 months of the year. The winters can get kind of like our spring, although not quite as cold, but kind of stormy and a lot of rain. But it was warm and sunny a lot, and that was surprisingly depressing.
Mm-hmm. Now, I'm kind of curious, though, because I wouldn't think of Sicily to be a wave-riding place, having been in the Mediterranean myself and in those areas. But is there surfing that goes on down there? Yes,
Sicily does have some good surf spots. Not great, but the kind of surf that they get it's all very short fetch. So, like, in the Northwest here, we have waves that are generated in Alaska. So by the time they get to our shores, they're groomed and nicely spaced and a little bit more organized, versus in Sicily, all the waves come from very short destinations away, storms that blow over Africa or the winds that blow over Spain. And so if you look at the distance of that the waves travel, or that the wind has come and the waves are coming into Sicily, it's not very long. And so the surf is not very good. It's the period, which is the distance between waves, is very short, and they're often choppy, and it's often windy. So it's not great, but it's enough to get in the water and kind of get your fix.
Mm-hmm. I know, because I was thinking about that, and then I was remembering another documentary, Step Into Liquid, in which they were talking about different surf places around the world, and one of them was actually off the coast of Texas, where they surf oil tanker wakes. I thought, boy, if you really need a fix in surfing, boy, you're going to find any way you can do to get on that board.
That's right. I mean, sometimes you just get desperate, You look at the waves, and it just looks terrible. But, you haven't been in the water for months, and you just can't stand it. So, yeah, you get in, and it's always worthwhile.
Mm-hmm. Now, I know one thing, too, that I remember years ago, as I grew up in Southern California myself, in San Pedro, and there was surfing going on out there at Carbillo Beach, and I got to know friends who were doing it, and they said that one of the hardest moments in their lives as surfers is waiting for any kind of surf to happen where they can get on the waves, and they actually get pretty nasty and grouchy, and you just don't really want to be around them. Did you find yourself experiencing sometimes modes of depression when you were at a spot and you thought, oh, we're not going to be doing any surfing for a while, it looks like?
That was definitely Sicily. When we moved there, we had done some research, and I had found out that, yes, they do have surf, and I don't know if I had just glazed over the details or I just was being optimistic, but when we moved there, it was late spring, and there's no surf in the summer at all. There's just no wind, really. It's just too hot and sunny. So there was no surf for months at a time, and that had been the longest I'd gone without surfing. And I mean, coupled with being away from home and family and friends and a brand new environment, and that it was 110 degrees, probably had something to do with it too.
Yeah, I can imagine.
But
as
boy,
you were describing in the book, it was like 90 degrees at 6 o'clock in the morning, and I know how tough that can be.
That alone will get you depressed at least if you're from the Northwest.
Yeah, especially if you're from the Northwest. Now, of all the places that you surfed, what do you think was probably your favorite?
Gosh, well, in terms of the waves, probably Costa Rica. I mean, we've been there several times, which might be a testament to how much we love it. But the waves there are not world class, but they are consistent. So you can surf. You could surf every minute of the day somewhere, and that's hard to say about a lot of places. Even Hawaii, they do have flat spells, or they do have really, some bad winds. And in Costa Rica, every time we've been there, we have we've surfed our brains out, which is kind of the goal when we go down there, and it's always accomplished. So I love Costa Rica just because of that, and I love the culture, and the people are just so friendly and just a wonderful, happy culture. And it's cheap, which is really great when you're out and about. But I think the most interesting experience and interesting destination is probably Fiji. It's the one that changed me the most. It challenged me the most, and the culture was just so delightful that those two are my favorites for different reasons.
Now, Amy, as I understand it, you became a middle school science teacher. Is that something that you still do, or?
No, I was a teacher for about 3 years.
Okay.
And then I decided to give that up to try to do some other things. When that included writing, and probably had something to do with wanting to surf more. Okay.
Because I just kind of wondered, as your students may have discovered that you were surfing, did they elicit any stories out of you to get you to talk about what that is? Because it's not every day you realize that your teacher, especially in middle school, actually is cool.
That may have been part of my problem with my students, and one of the reasons why I didn't make it very well as a teacher was that I just wanted to be their friends, and I wanted to hang out with them, and I wanted to know more about them and their lives, and I wanted to be a part of their life and not just their teacher for 47 minutes a day, and
right.
And it got me into some trouble just with my discipline. I just probably wasn't as much of a hammer as I needed to be with that age group, but yeah, They did, once they did find out that I was a surfer, it was in the last year that I taught, they did try to get me to talk about it. And actually I took a couple of my students out several times sort of in the last part of the year with me when I went surfing and taught them a little bit. We would stop at the rental shop and they'd get a board and get a wetsuit, and I'd take them down to the beach and I'd try to teach them to surf because they were just so eager to try it. And that was really fun. And I wish there was a way I could do more of that because it's really fun to surf, but it's just so much more rewarding to watch someone else fall in love with it too.
Oh, I can imagine. Especially you get the kid who sits there as a scowl. He's probably, doesn't remember what it was like, and then you throw him on a board and he smiles or she smiles, and they go, I didn't realize I could feel like this. I want more of this.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Now, as you were surfing in the different areas around the world, Amy, did you see a variety as far as ages out there getting up on boards?
Yeah. It's always a mix. And everyone has their own style. In California, you see just everybody surfs. When I've surfed down there, you see little kids, like, 9 or 10-year-old little boys or girls on longboards, or you see, older guys on shortboards. You see like a mom and daughter out, or you see, a dad and his son out. You see a large mix of people. I think as the water gets colder, you see less of the little kids just because I think it's too cold. But I mean, I've seen 80-year-olds out there. I've seen little kids. I mean, it's something that everybody can do, depending upon the conditions and what kind of board you ride. If you leave your options open, you can be out there until you're on your way to the nursing home, I think.
There you go. Maybe it'll keep you from surfing into one, that's for sure. For those of you just tuning in, we're talking with Amy Waschel, and her book is Chasing Waves, A Surfer's Tale of Obsessive Wondering. Now, it's interesting, Amy, when you take on a lifestyle like this, and it can be one of those hobbies or thrills that somebody engages and realizes, I want to do this more and more and more, but where do I find the time of the day? And I suppose you'd have to find real balance in something like that, but it's certainly something that's worthwhile, as you've been describing. Now, in your book, you talk about something that, for me, I don't know why it stood out, but it was Witch's Rock.
Yes, it's a wave in Costa Rica.
Mm-hmm.
And it stands like a beacon. You can see it from just about everywhere when you approach, and most people approach by a boat because the jungle is so thick and the roads are so bad. And so you can see this chalky block of rock that just almost glows, and that's why they call it Witch's Rock, because it has this eerie presence to it. And it produces, the rock actually doesn't produce the wave. The wave is more of a beach break, but it breaks right in front of that rock as you're sitting there looking out at the ocean. And it's a really amazing place. I mean, you really feel like you're in the middle of nowhere, especially if you're the only group of people that are there, and that's happened to me several times, which is odd because it's a world-class wave, and a lot of people do go there. But it produces a really, really fast, just a lightning-fast wave that breaks sometimes in both directions. And it's a beach that apparently there's a crocodile that lives in the river that outflows right there by the lineup, but I've never seen it, thankfully.
So if it ain't sharks, it's alligator or crocodiles we're dealing with.
Yeah, in Costa Rica there's crocodiles in almost all the rivers, and that is definitely a factor in your decision making to get in the water. But I'm usually too scared about the waves to worry about sharks or anything else that's living in the water.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know it's interesting because there are people who may have never surfed and think, well, I don't know if I want to do that because of sharks, but you really just don't get bothered by sharks very much. I mean, it's like almost a phenomenal occurrence if it even does happen.
Yeah, I mean, you hear about shark attacks a lot in California, and there have been, I think there was a great white shark attack on a surfer in Cannon Beach, Oregon in the 70s, I want to say.
Right.
But other than that, up north, where you'd think there'd be lots of sharks, knock on wood, but I haven't really experienced any real need to be afraid of sharks.
Now, I'm curious, Amy, because you're now a mother, you have a daughter. Is she picking up the board at all, or do you see that probably happening in her future?
Oh, I hope so, but she's only, let's see, she's 20 months old, so she's not quite old enough.
That's a perfect age. No fear.
Just get her a wetsuit and strap her on. I could probably duct tape her to the tip of my board, and she'd probably love it. But
that's what I was just thinking. You get one of those tandem things like you see bicycles where the dad pulls the little kid behind her to have something like that for a surfboard.
Yeah, that would be fantastic if Elsa, my daughter, chooses to pursue the life of a surfer. But it's also, she's her own person too, so she'll go where she wants to go, and I'll support her 100%. But while she's doing that, I'll be out surfing.
There you go. Well, Amy, tell our listeners if they were thinking, this is something I want to do, how do I get started? Do you just go buy a board and go to the beach, or what would you recommend? Especially if they're getting, a little older in the years and they're not, as fearless as you would be, say, in middle school or whatever the case is.
Right. The best way is to go, if you can go to a surf shop and let them know that you'd like to try it, and just so that they'll know what kind of gear to set you up with. And I would just rent a wetsuit and a longboard, and you can go out and kind of watch other people and try to figure it out on your own. Or, I mean, it's never a bad idea to take a lesson, just at least to get the basic safety stuff down, so that you kind of know where to paddle and what kinds of waves are suited better for beginners, and how to be respectful of other surfers in the water, which is really important, and just kind of a general overview of kind of how surfing works. And then once you get the basics, it's really just time in the water. So going out as much as you can, even if for an hour, and doing some practicing and just paddling. Paddling alone is difficult. and it takes a little bit of practice. So if you can get your paddling down, even if there aren't very good waves, if you go out and just practice paddling, then then you're already improving.
Sounds like a lot of fun, and it sounds like that the surfing on the horizon is going to continue for as long as you can get up on the board, especially if you get your daughter feeling encouraged to do the same. But there was just one last question I had now. In surfing, as you've been to the different places you've been around the world, did you find this to be a very community-inclusive experience, or did you at times experience any sort of a territorial behavior? Because I know that sometimes surfers are like a little groups, they find their little particular places that they like to surf and pretty much just stay away. But did you find that that wasn't so much the case?
Most of the places that we've surfed away from the United States, there's not really that sense of territorialism, like in Costa Rica or Fiji, Morocco. And a lot of people, that's not their home turf. So people come from outside to surf there. So no one really has that claim that this is, their local spot. And in Fiji, the Fijians don't even swim. They don't surf, they don't swim. So
on an island and they don't swim. What's up with that?
Yeah, they're not really into the water at all. So that wasn't the problem. More when you get to places like California or some places in Oregon and Washington too, they do have a little bit more of that localism feel. But I really have had not really any, I would say, territorialism aimed directly at me, and I don't know if that's because of the smile on my face when I'm out there, or just that, I don't know, maybe because I'm a girl, that might be part of it too. But if you have a friendly face and you're respectful of the other surfers in the water, then that generally is enough to kind of break the ice. So I wouldn't let that hold you back.
Again, the book is Chasing Waves, A Surfer's Tale of Obsessive Wandering, and our guest, Amy Weschel. And I'd like to thank you for being on the program and, kind of breathing a sense of adventure and just becoming fearless again. And again, it's interesting because I know that I have even talked with surfers that actually help with people who have, terminal sicknesses, and it seems that they kind of give back a spirit that they've lost just in sharing their experiences. And you can see where this really has a lot of healing benefits, if you will, whether you're doing it or you're just watching it, being involved in it one way or the other. And what a tremendous lifestyle that must be for you.
It is. It's amazing, and it's fun to be out in the water with friends and sitting there watching the waves come in and then sharing waves. It's got to be one of the most precious times I think I've ever had.
Now I know that you write for Surfline.com. Is that true?
I've written some stories for them, yes.
Yeah, tell us about that website real quickly.
Surfline is a forecast-based website with lots of other events, information, and travel information as well. But you can go to surfline.com and type in an area that you're curious about, and they'll give you, based on their information, which relies on buoy information in terms of the swell, wind direction, tides, and they'll tell you when the surf's going to be good. They give you kind of a score, and then they also give you the details. So you can say you want to go surf, Seal Beach in California. You can type it in, and they'll give you, when the tides are going to be high, and when the winds are going to be slight, and all that good stuff, so that you'll know when it's a good time to go.
So it seems the Boy Scout credo is be prepared is just as relevant in surfing.
Yeah. Well, it just means you won't get skunked. If you know that it's going to be good, then you can maybe plan a little bit better your day or your weekend. And if you know that it's going to be bad weather or no swell, then you'll go do something else.
I think it's neat to understand that you plan to be spontaneous. Amy, again, it's been a pleasure to have you on the program and the book Chasing Waves, and tell people how they can find out how to get it.
You can go to my website, which is www.amyweschel.com. You can go to Amazon.com, and you can also go to my publisher's website, which is mountaineersbooks.org.
All right. Well, hang 10, Amy, and surf's up, and it's time to go, and thank you for joining us on the program today.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much.
You bet. So there it is, Chasing Waves. Get out there and get your own adventure as well. We also encourage you to visit us at our website at beyond50radio.com. That is the number 50 with a 50, and sign up for our free weekly e-newsletter, and also visit us at our blog where we post all of our archives as well as other great resource information. Would also like to thank one of the following sponsors for making the Beyond 50 program possible, and that is ZRT Laboratory. If you're suffering from hot flashes, foggy thinking, sudden weight gain, low libido, mood swings, and other effects of aging, ZRT Laboratory, the forerunner in hormone testing, is your first step toward ending troublesome symptoms. Simply visit them online at www.zrtlab.com to find out how their home collection kits can help detect and correct hidden hormone imbalances. Let testing be your guide to symptom relief and life-changing solutions that begin with you. Remember, a physician's guidance is recommended. Thank you again for tuning in. You've been listening to the Beyond 50 radio program. I'm Daniel Davis, and remember, surf your day past halfway.